Wonderful couple of own goals from Bill English earlier today. First off, he said New Zealand's got too much debt, but today he confirmed in question time Labour cut net debt to zero, and it was only 5% when he took office. Now, he's been in office 18 months. New Zealanders think it's time he grew up and took responsibility. Then he claimed that New Zealand was like Greece and Portugal. Well, talk about selling your own brand down the river. They are the most indebted countries in the OECD. New Zealand debt's only a third of the average. Can't be the same. Get your figures right, Mr. English. And then to top it off, he said Labour was fiscally profligate, but we wouldn't promise to put GST down. We'll talk about self-contradiction in one sentence. 3 own goals from Bill English before lunchtime. Mr. Speaker, the difference between our two parties is Labour doesn't want New Zealand to be a raw log economy. We don't want to see a country so dumb that it earns $14 billion from a 100% pure tourism brand and then mines its own national parks to drive tourists away. And we don't want to see our primary industry, dairying, being sold off paddock by paddock to Fonterra's competitors so they can undermine it by getting their hands on the milk supply. Mr. Speaker, Todd McLean, the rising star of the National Party, in his column this week says, as a country we must be focused on tilting the playing field towards productive investment, exports and new jobs, and we need a balanced program to achieve that. Well, we agree, but what is the government's record, Mr. Speaker? Remember the Jobs Summit? It produced what? Wait for it. A cycleway that might get 200 jobs. What about the 9-day fortnight? Such a miserable failure, the government canned it in the middle of the recession. What about the rolling mall? Well, that was kind of a Clayton's plan, no offence to Mr. Cosgrove, a plan you have when you don't have a plan. Or catching up with Australia by 2025. The plan was dead on arrival as soon as it left Don Brash's hands, and there's no target for 2025 or 2020 or 2015, not even 2010, because they don't talk about catching Australia anymore. Why not? Because they don't have a plan. They are a government adrift in a sea of focus groups and PR spin, a government led by a man who would sell his mother if he thought there was votes in it, and a Minister of Finance with all the imagination of a Dipton farmer, the vision of a Treasury analyst, and the good judgment to claim housing allowances for both at the same time. Mr. Speaker, a series of short-term bits and pieces does not an economic plan make. And that is why Exporter magazine said that, quote, just digging up raw minerals or growing a few more sheep isn't going to get us to the high-wage, high-value economy that we need. High-tech exporters are going broke, while these guys are too scared to change monetary policy rather than drive them out of business with high exchange rates. And the country's leading sustainable businesses, the 100% plan, have been turned away by this government rather than get behind clean jobs and clean technology. Mr. Speaker, ordinary Kiwis know in their guts that things haven't been fixed. They feel increasingly insecure for their jobs and their families. And ordinary Kiwis know that if we're going to turn this boat around, we have to pay our way in the world economy. And to do that, we've got to fix the underlying triple deficit that's holding us back. New Zealand doesn't export enough, it doesn't save enough, and it doesn't innovate enough. That is the underlying problem with this economy. But Bill English doesn't get it. He thinks it's all about the budget deficit, and his recipe to that triple deficit is to just cut social spending and hurt the most vulnerable New Zealanders. It's the wrong question, Mr. Speaker. It's not only unfair, it's just bad economics, because it doesn't go to the heart of the problem. So instead, this is a government with no answers that stands idly by while Kiwis borrow from overseas banks to bid up each other's house prices. They watch while we paper over current account deficits by selling assets and building up long-term debt. A government with no answers and no hope.
Honourable Ruth Tyson.
Speaker.